Do you feel frustrated trying to grow your franchise? Are you having trouble balancing your consumer and franchise development marketing? Do you wish there was an easier way? Imagine if you had a proven roadmap to take your franchise's marketing from costing you to making you money. That's why we've created the Franchise Growth Blueprint. We walk you through the exact same process that we use to run franchise marketing campaigns for our clients at scale that has resulted in triple-digit growth. This blueprint isn't for anyone. It's not for people just starting a franchise. It's not for franchises without long-term goals. This is for franchises that want to scale up their marketing in a predictable and profitable way using a proven roadmap. If you want to sell more franchises, keep your current franchisees happy, all while saving money and learning from people who've already done it, go to franchiseblueprint.com and sign up today. That's franchiseblueprint.com. Now for today's episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Franchise Growth Podcast. Today, I have a very special guest. His name is Carmelo Marsala. He is located in Boucherville, Quebec, a fellow Canadian, and he is the founder and CEO of SprayNet. Welcome, Carmelo.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. So for those of our listeners who don't know what SprayNet is, I'd love to hear a little bit more about, what you guys do and how you even got started as well.
Yeah, well, I was actually a student painting franchisee back in 2006. Actually, I started with a college pro, which no longer is painting now, unfortunately. But yeah, that's where I got my start. And we were doing a lot of conventional painting. Well, that's the only thing we were doing. Mm-hmm. So exterior painting was one of the main things that I was doing. And, into my third year, I started to realize that conventional paints weren't necessarily made for someone who really just wanted to change the color, but more just for maintenance painting on wood and stuff. So there's a lot of surfaces that we weren't able to do properly, like front doors, garage doors, vinyl siding, aluminum siding. Anything that required like a durable factory finish wasn't really possible with conventional latex paints. So that's kind of how we started. I said, okay, well, how are they doing it in the factory? Went to visit a factory and realized that those products can't be applied on site. So then reached out to my network and figured, okay, there must be someone that's a chemist, and I finally found one to work with me. And we started creating these formulas. And essentially what we've done is we reverse engineered the process of factory painting to be able to apply that same durability and finish directly on site for a variety of surfaces.
Wow, that is very cool. Quite the story. And how have things been going since you started? I believe you're celebrating your 10-year mark now.
Yeah, soon to be 10 years. So we actually started franchising in 2014. We did like a test with 2 franchisees, not too far from us. And then we really started franchising for real, I guess, if you will, in 2015. By 2017, we had sold out all of Canada. So in less than 3 years, we pretty much sold out all of Canada. And the reason for that was A, because we have a unique offering, and B, because we were on Dragon's Den. So the combination of those two allowed us to explode, right? So that was cool. And now we've recently begun our U.S. development efforts, and we have 2 locations opening, with 2 more opening soon, depending on all that's going to happen with everything going on with global pandemic and stuff like that. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, very cool. And I recently saw that you guys won the 2020 Next Gen Award at the IFA show. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. That was pretty cool. So we originally won it in 2016, and they called back all the winners and runners up, and we competed again, and it's pretty cool to win that again, which was good validation once again for us, and allowed us to make a lot of connections too.
Cool, very cool. So why did you guys decide to go the franchise route rather than keeping everything corporate owned?
Yeah, that's a good question. Especially in the service industry, because, like if you have a restaurant, you can probably open, 10, 15 locations within, a few kilometers, few mile radius. But in franchising in the service space, it's exclusive territory. So, across all of Canada, we've only got about 60 territories. So, when you factor in geography, how complicated it is to do things, starting in the service industry, having an owner operator just made a lot more sense. We wanted to make sure that, we can really scale the business properly and not skip on quality. And, when you have an owner who's operating the business, it's different than an employee who potentially can just leave.
For sure. Yeah, that totally makes sense. So now that you're expanding into the US, how have you been finding that expansion process compared to Canada?
Everyone says, oh, it's completely different. And I don't see that it is very different. Obviously there's some differences, but we're kind of like the younger brother to the US. But we speak the same language. Depending on where you go, we share a similar culture. Hollywood is across North America, so it kind of dictates culture to some degree. The major difference for me would be in terms of the registrations. There's different registrations for different states, but it's only normal, right? Every state in the U.S. is pretty much, some of the states are bigger than our entire nation. So I think as you go bigger, it's normal that things are going to be a bit different. But so far, we've just been finding great people, and the people that are progressive enough to kind of come up here for a discovery day are the kind of people that we want anyways, right? Our fourth company value is progressive. So it's a bit different, but it's a bigger market.
Right. Totally. So what's the biggest challenge that you've faced so far in growing SprayNet?
The biggest one, I can talk about this for hours, but, I spoke about 2015 to 2017, and, it sounds really impressive to sell an entire country in less than 3 years. But, when we sold all those franchises after Dragon's Den, my team was pretty much me and our corporate staff. And by corporate staff, I mean the guys running our corporate location. So I didn't have any franchise support staff. We had zero resources. So we literally had to pull everybody out of our corporate territories to support our franchisees. And, your corporate territories and franchising at the beginning are your cash cow. That's what allows you to fund your franchise. So when you're pulling all your resources out of that, and that's not making money anymore, you get into a serious cash crunch. And, we talk about growing pains. Definitely learned a lot from 2015 to 2017 in terms of raising debt capital, because we had done everything bootstrapping, right? So we had to get financing. We explored every subsidy that known to man. Literally, cash became king, and I really understood the meaning of that term.
Wow. So any pro tips for debt financing or just financing in general for other franchise owners out there?
Well, I think if you're in Canada, in the U.S. it's different. So in the U.S. there's usually a ton of money. If you want an investor, it's relatively easy to get capital. In Canada, it's kind of a different story. However, because we're more social capitalists, it is a bit easier to get subsidies, grants, and because we have good banks like the BDC who support entrepreneurs, it is possible with a good plan to get financing. So it's just really about planning, right? So I think one of my favorite quotes is failing to plan is planning to fail, right? So if you plan properly and you inspire confidence in bankers, we've had the support of the BDC as well as because we do a lot of R&D, we get R&D tax credits. So you just got to get creative. You got to look online for what's available to you. Maybe even hire someone. There's a ton of people who can help you get subsidies or debt financing if you don't have the expertise to do so. But the resources are there. You just got to look for them.
For sure. Yeah, I was actually talking to another client of mine who is a franchise as well, and they're taking advantage of the very healthy research and innovation and research and development tax credit opportunities up here in Canada. So it's definitely a way to help subsidize growth for sure.
Yeah, so since 2014, we've received close to $1 million in tax credits.
Wow.
That represents close to a quarter of all the expenses that we've done on R&D, right? Of course, we're a very R&D heavy company because everything we do is proprietary, but still, even if you are, there's certain things that qualify for R&D that you wouldn't think would qualify. Ours is kind of, straightforward because we're actually doing chemistry and stuff, but you never know.
For sure. Could you speak a little bit more about those things that you wouldn't quite expect to be covered in R&D?
Yeah, well, I'm not an expert, and I'm probably saying this out of like hearsay, just because I've heard people claim things that I'm like, well, that doesn't seem like R&D to me, but apparently it is. So I mean, I guess I would say contact those consultants who can help you put together your R&D stuff, because if you are doing something different, and again, we got audited, right? So like, it's not, the government is not just going to give everybody money. However, sometimes we're doing things that we don't realize are R&D. As an example, some of the stuff that we thought was R&D wasn't, and some of the stuff that we didn't think was R&D qualified. So it's just about being informed of the laws, and usually a consultant can help you with that. We actually have a pretty good consultant that we use.
Awesome. Very cool. So this is, a marketing growth podcast. So let's chat about that. What's the best marketing campaign that you've ran so far?
The best marketing campaign for franchise development, or for our customers, or both?
Both.
Yeah, both. Well, I guess like the best campaign, we run a series of campaigns. I guess maybe we should start with the platforms. I mean, the platforms that we use at work, of course, are Facebook. Everybody's on Facebook, Instagram, AdWords, and we have been using Pinterest more and more, just because, especially for our business, people are looking for renovation ideas on Pinterest, and that's what was worked for us. What we're doing more of now is we're moving away from traditional TV and more onto YouTube, which I believe to be the new TV. In terms of how we market, in terms of our messaging, well, that depends on the province, but video, of course, video marketing for us has been the best, because our service is very visual.
Very cool. And how about on the franchise development side?
Yeah, so, not that different, because, I mean, typically people who are going to be your customers might potentially be your franchisees too. So, those people are also on Facebook. They are also searching on AdWords. They are looking for ideas on Pinterest. So we haven't necessarily used Pinterest for franchise development yet, just because it's less business oriented, but definitely LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, AdWords. As long as you have the right messaging to the right person, the platform, is just a catalyst to connect you to.
For sure. That makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting that, you're switching budget away from traditional TV advertising and into YouTube. How have you found that transition so far? And what are some of the key takeaways and insights that you've been able to gather?
Yeah, so literally we're in the process of doing that, so I can't necessarily comment too much on that. What I would say, the reason why we made that decision is because you could be a lot more targeted on YouTube. You could also measure a lot better on YouTube, right? So we always talk about what's the ROI on TV. It's very difficult to measure. Well, now we have a way to measure that, and it's called YouTube.
Right. Cool. Very, very cool. Yeah. Very cool. So you mentioned, Facebook and Instagram and, Pinterest and all these other social networks. So zooming in onto Facebook specifically, with this whole shift towards, being more privacy focused, especially with the whole Cambridge Analytica issue that, came up a few years back. How have you found your social digital strategy shifting now that privacy is a bit more of a concern for these platforms and for consumers as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I talk about Facebook, I'm talking about Facebook and Instagram. So even though Instagram is owned by Facebook, it doesn't seem like they got hit as hard. And to be honest, like, there's still a lot of people on Facebook. So I always tell people, it's like, just because we react a certain way to something doesn't mean everybody else will. Same thing like the pandemic that's happening now. Some people are freaking out. Some people are calm. Some people actually are bored and want to get their house painted, so we would automatically assume that everybody's panicking, but they're not, right? So it's the same thing with Facebook. There are still people using Facebook. It still has worked for us. And Instagram works too, right? So a lot of people have switched over to Instagram, but I mean, it's still owned by Facebook. So targeting is very similar.
Very, very true. So you brought up a good point with the COVID-19 crisis that's going on right now. How are you guys dealing with that? How are you finding things shifting? I know you mentioned it a little briefly, but I'd love to learn a bit more about how exactly are you managing franchisee expectations, and even on the consumer marketing side as well.
Yeah, so just over communicating, right? So we use Yammer, which is our internal social media as part of Office 365, and pretty much every day send out a communication of what's happening. Actually, right after this call, I'm going to click send on our plan that's going to be happening over the next week or two. But this is actually, for me, I see this as a bit of an opportunity and a catalyst because we've been wanting to go virtual with our quotes for so long. And, you know, it's just a question of, okay, when do we actually invest? And now is the perfect time, right? So we're actually shifting all of our marketing campaigns to talk about virtual quoting. And we're putting the digital infrastructure in place to be able to do it. And, you know, and now we'll be able to test it and tweak it and optimize it so that in the future, you know, it's going to pay dividends forever. So this is actually a good way to, I guess, enforce or promote change. And you know, the things that you were going to do just need to happen a bit quicker now. So if anything, it's a good thing.
Yeah, you know what? You hit the nail right on the head, because a lot of the companies that we're working with over here at Cogneta, they're doing the same thing, right? They're finding innovative and innovative solutions that really leverage technology to the nth degree to help drive innovation, to help drive performance. So I'm super happy that, you know, companies like yours and other franchises are using this as an opportunity to be innovative and discover new both like marketing and growth and revenue channels. That's fantastic to hear.
Yeah.
Cool. So, you know, if you could go back when you first started, what would you do differently?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask that question. I'd say nothing, because you always make the best decisions with the information that you have at that time, right? So I don't like to you know, talk about hindsight because it's 2020, right? Yep. So I don't think I would do anything differently. If I was going to be starting a business now, would I be doing it? You know, would that be different? If that angle better answers your question, well, of course. Now I have a lot more experience. I know how to make a plan. You know, everything would be a lot more calculated. But you know, when you're starting up, you got to learn these things, and you know, no matter how many books you read, you still got to live through it and gain that experience and get those battle scars. So, you know, I'm kind of 2015 to 2017. You know, seemed great on the outside, was extremely painful on the inside, but I never learned more, right? So, you just got to go through those things to get that learning.
Very true, very true. So let's talk a little bit more about those learnings. Like, what advice would you give to someone just starting out as a franchise, you know, opening up their system to the public? What advice would you give them? We'll get right back to the show, but do you feel frustrated trying to grow your franchise? Are you having trouble balancing your consumer and franchise development marketing? Do you wish there was an easier way? Imagine if you had a roadmap to take your franchise's marketing from costing you to making you money. That's why we've created the Franchise Growth Blueprint. To find out more, visit franchisegrowthblueprint.com. That's franchisegrowthblueprint.com. Now back to today's episode.
Yeah, so I would read. I would definitely do a lot of reading, right? Like I spoke about planning before. So the book Traction is a great one. We use that. It's an entrepreneur operating system on how to run our business. You know, Shelley Sun wrote a really good book, Grow Smart, Risk Less, on pretty much how to start a franchise. You know, if you're starting a franchise, you should definitely read that book. You know, there's the Franchise E Factor too, which is a good book just to understand, you know, the different stages of franchisees' emotions, because it is an emotional roller coaster for both the franchisor and the franchisee at the beginning, because, you know, kind of nobody knows exactly what to expect and how how everything plays out. So I would say read as much as possible and plan as best as you can. If you can surround yourself with mentors or people who've done it, of course that helps. That's one thing that I did a bit later, which maybe I could have done earlier. But I would say there's a ton of resources both through the CFA and the IFA. Take advantage of them.
For sure. So you mentioned about going through that emotional roller coaster, both on the franchisor and franchisee side. So how do you help manage expectations for franchisees, especially when you're just starting out? And how have you seen that transition to to your system as you've grown bigger?
Yeah, so now we have a more formal way of doing that, right, through our initial training. I love talking about the business transition curve. So, the uninformed optimism that everybody has at the beginning, and then the informed pessimism, and then, the crisis of meaning, and then back up that curve to informed optimism. And I think that curve is especially important to communicate, because it's important to know how your emotions are affecting you at the time that they are affecting you, so that you can actually get past it. And if you haven't seen that, you think it's not normal, but everybody goes through it. So we have a pretty big focus on that business transition curve. I like to talk about that. Initially, though, I've always been someone who's been quite clear and transparent, and I think that's been a key to helping us grow. And I pretty much told our first two franchisees, it's like, hey guys, like, I've never done this before. I've been a franchisee, so I kind of have an idea. But like, it's going to be on you guys. So like, if you need me, call me. But our first training was pretty much me in the room with both of them, and I had prepared some stuff, and it was like, you got any questions? So they kind of knew what they were getting into, right? So it's understanding yourself as a franchisor, where you're at, so that you can communicate that properly to them, so that they understand that, hey, you're not buying McDonald's here.
Right, right. Those are great points that you bring up. Have you seen the types of franchisees that you've been bringing into the system change as you've grown and your franchise network has grown? And if so, how?
Yeah, absolutely. So now we get a lot more executive type people looking into our system, and you know what? Like, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. It's to be seen. But our first franchisees that we chose were the most entrepreneurial, of course, because you're a kind of a pioneer getting into a new system, and they're doing fantastically. Not to say that the executive types don't do fantastic, because they're doing quite well. But I'd be curious to see in the next few years, who does better, and what's the best profile for us. We're still trying to kind of figure that out, because we're still relatively new. So, it's a question of, our dual unit operators doing better than our single unit operators? Should we sell 3 units to someone where that hasn't worked in the past, but now that our system is more mature and our processes are better defined, can that work? So, I mean, I think anything can work. It's just a question of how well buttoned up your processes are and your system is to scale.
Right. So let's shift gears a bit. Like, we always see franchises doing well in the headlines, winning awards, growing their network very rapidly, like yourself. But not a lot is talked about on the negative side, right? Like on the losses side. So I'd love to hear what has been your biggest loss to date.
Yeah, well, we couldn't have been the most. I think we were probably the most celebrated brand in Canada from 2015 to 2017. We broke every Canadian record in the home service space. We were the fastest growing consumer services company in Canada for 3 years in a row. So on the outside, it all seemed amazing, but on the inside, talk about losses. Well, I kind of touched on that before, is the way we were funding our franchise system is through our corporate territories. That was our cash cow. That was the only place we were actually making any money, and that lost money. So when you compound the loss of all your investments that you need to make to become a franchisor, plus your cash cow is losing money, well, now you're at a huge deficit, right? And it's like, what do you do now? So pretty much everything I made from 2010 to 2015 disappeared in 2016, 2017, and more. So, yeah. And then, in 2018 and 2019, we're cleanup and we're finally back on solid ground, and boom, global pandemic. So, there's always something, right? And I guess you just have to be aware of that, right? Like, I find comfort in chaos, and as an entrepreneur, I think you have no choice but to.
For sure. So let's move into the lightning round. What is your favorite tool or app that you just can't live without?
Pardon? What? I didn't hear that.
Yeah. What is your favorite tool or app that you can't live without?
Tool or app that I can't live without? Well, Outlook. I mean, I would say in general, Office 365. Like everything, Teams, Yammer, and Outlook is the things that I use the most.
Cool. Very cool. And the second question is, like, what is your favorite book? And I know you mentioned a whole lot before, but if you could only choose one to read, what would it be?
The book that helped me the most initially was The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber.
That is a fantastic book. I actually reread that quite often. It's a great one. Cool. So who's the franchise founder that you look up to most, and why?
I never really thought of that one, but I would say probably Dave Mortensen, who's the founder and CEO of Anytime Fitness. He's actually on our advisory board, and just someone that I connect with the most. And they've got 5,000 franchises in 7 continents. They're the only ones to be on all 7 continents, which is a pretty cool goal that they hit.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And last question is, where can people find out more about you and your company?
Well, by visiting our website, so spray-net.com or SprayNetFranchise.com. Those are our 2 sites. One is for franchises, and the other one is for our services. But yeah, definitely the best places.
Awesome. Well, Carmelo, thank you so much for hopping on our podcast today. It was much appreciated. I'm sure our audience had a ton of insights from everything that you shared. It is much appreciated.
Hope so, and thanks for having me.
All right. Bye for now. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Franchise Marketing Podcast. If you found this episode useful, share it with a friend and subscribe now so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. And until then, happy marketing.